Story 1. Years ago, I worked at an all-you-can-eat country buffet in South Carolina. I was a busboy. One day, I went to a table that was a mess. It appeared to be a large group or several families, about 12 people. What stuck in my memory was that whenever they finished eating, they would scrape their plates and use them again, scraping the food onto the floor next to their chairs. Next to each chair was a 6-inch to 18-inch pile of chicken bones, crab legs, mashed potatoes, and remnants of baked potatoes. It was just disgusting. Story 2. I bus tables at a slightly nicer restaurant. On Fridays and Sundays, we offer a prime rib and crab leg buffet, along with a salad bar, hot and cold entrees, and a dessert bar. Our buffet runner keeps anyone from doing ungodly things to the spread. One family of 5 came in and, from the moment they arrived until they left, they ate as many crab legs as they could. The server and I cleared plates as fast as we could. But each time we returned, another mountain of crab shells had appeared in front of every family member. I do not know how they ate so much. I honestly can't recall if they ordered anything besides crab. Piles of shells were left on the table when they left. It was a sight to behold. After I wiped the table and reset the place settings, I had to get another rag because something in the crab juices reacted with our sanitizer and left a milky residue. Not pleasant. When I leave this job, I'll never be able to look at crab legs the same way. Story 3. This is not my story, but a friend of mine weighed over 400 pounds and could eat a lot. He went to a casino buffet that was one of the higher-end ones, which had crab legs and steak. Around his 4th or 5th plate stacked full of crab legs, the manager came out and gave him $250 in free slot play to leave the buffet. Note: I checked with my friend and he said there were 2 other men with him, and none of them weighed less than 300 pounds. They consumed an enormous amount of food between them, and he outate them. The buffet cost $50 per person, but they each likely ate 3 to 4 times that amount, and he likely ate 8 to 10 times that amount. He then won just over $100 with the free slot play. If you cannot beat the casinos at the games, beat them at the buffet or the bar. Story 4. A woman came in with 2 of her children and had a regular meal. At our place you pay when you leave, and she decided to sneak out with her younger daughter before paying, leaving her young son alone at the table. We caught on quickly and sent someone after her. They found her in her car in the parking garage, waiting for her son. She refused to return and pay, so we had to keep her son with us until the police arrived. I cannot believe what some people will do to their children. We later learned from her son that she had stolen a manager's key card and that they regularly used it to enter the hotel and go swimming in the top floor pool. She was clever, but that did not excuse her behavior. Story 5. My first job was as a dishwasher in an all-you-can-eat fried catfish buffet. People are animals, especially the ones who take far more food from the buffet than they can eat. Then they pile the leftovers on a plate or tray, cover them in ketchup and tartar sauce, and pour their iced tea over the top. Many people did this, taking at least 2 plates like that each night. Story 6. I went to Golden Corral as a customer. As I walked to the chocolate fountain, 3 little girls stepped in front of me and put their hands into the fountain. Their family, seated at the table nearest the fountain, laughed and said how cute it was. Employees turned the fountain off immediately. Story 7. A buffet in my area was shut down for serving coyote meat labeled as other meats. Story 8. At one point, 2 other family members and I worked at a Golden Corral, each in a different section, because small towns do not offer many job options for high school and college students. I worked in the bakery, which surprisingly had few horror stories apart from the chaos that remained after a large group of children came through. My brother worked the steak station. He had regulars who tipped him well if he prepared blue steaks for them. The very idea of ordering blue steaks from a buffet makes me gag. My cousin worked the salad bar. Management required her to keep seafood items on the bar long past the point when they were safe to eat. I think the record was chilled shrimp from Mother's Day that remained for over a week and a half. They finally let her throw them away when a customer complained about the smell. Story 9. I watched a man at the Ponderosa walk up to the buffet without a plate, untuck his t-shirt, pull the hem up to form a basket, reach into the steam tray of chicken wings with his bare hand, and load hot wings into his makeshift shirt bucket. The woman in the kitchen said, "Please, sir, could you use a plate? Or at least tongs?" The man scoffed and looked at her as if she had asked him to wear a tuxedo. Story 10. I picked up some fish and chips recently and saw they had all you can eat on Wednesdays. I asked what the most someone had eaten was. She said 18 pieces of fish and 3 plates of fries every single Wednesday, and she held up a huge platter. I asked if he ordered that exact meal every week. She said yes. He goes to a different all-you-can-eat every day of the week, and he got banned from the Chinese place down the road. Story 11. I worked at a pizza parlor that offered a lunch buffet of endless pizza. The lunch ran from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. A gentleman came in. I think he was homeless. He piled a sky-high plate of pizza and went to town. He stayed the entire time to make sure he got his money's worth. His body did not appreciate being stuffed like a piñata of pizza. He got up, waddled quickly to the bathroom, and I was later told he had liquid feces trailing behind him into the bathroom and inside it. My boss informed me about the incident. I told him I was heading out for a break. I was not about to clean that up. Story 12. My parents owned an all-you-can-eat buffet, and I was there every day from age 4 to 14. My favorite horror story is when a couple came in to eat. They loved the crab legs, and every time my mom puts them out, they took it all. Crab legs are expensive. Forget the other customers, they just took it and ate it all. They were there for maybe 2 hours, and it was getting dark. They had eaten through at least a week's stock of crab legs, and my mom finally decided it was enough. She stopped putting them out on the buffet and brought individual plates to the customers who wanted crab legs but could not get any because of this couple. Understandably, the couple was angry. They flipped the chairs at their table, overturned their plates, bowls, and cups, and completely trashed the area. Food was all over the floor, table, and chairs. Sticky soda was dripping into the carpet. They left in a hurry, but someone recorded their license plate. We called the police, and I think they pressed charges. I do not remember the aftermath details clearly because I was probably 8 or 9 years old. I am 20 now. I remember looking at the mess and feeling really angry that my sister and I had to clean it up with our mom. It was a family-run business, so we did not have much help. That is my horror story. Story 13. Not an employee, but a customer. A long time ago, my mother and I picked up a friend of hers and went to a local Chinese food buffet. This place had an option where you could get a pound of food for $5 in a takeout container instead of sitting and eating at the restaurant, so that was our plan. The 3 of us were browsing the buffet line with our takeout containers, adding what we wanted, and then I noticed my mother's friend doing something disgusting. He was eating a chicken wing right in front of the buffet line, hiding his face behind his takeout container. Then he took the chicken bone and put it back in the buffet tray. I walked over to my mother and told her what he was doing. At first she thought I was joking. She walked over toward him, and he was now standing there eating a slice of watermelon right off the buffet and then putting the rind back in the tray. My mother said, "What are you doing?" And he replied, "Do not worry, I do this all the time. They never notice." My mother and I panicked, worried that they were going to call the police because of this dipshit. We pretended not to know him and continued to fill our containers the right way. After a couple minutes, one of the employees walked up to my mother and told her that they had noticed what the man was doing. They also noticed that we were uncomfortable and did not intend to blame us. But they warned her that if she did not get him to pay for the food in his container and leave immediately, they would call the police. My mother told him that we needed to go now. He brushed it off and said, "I do not care. They are not going to do anything." My mother and I walked up to the front, paid for our containers, apologized, and left him in the restaurant. A minute later, you could see and hear him shouting with the staff. He threw his container on the ground, food splattered everywhere, and he stormed out shouting insults. He said, "I am never coming back." To which they replied, "You are not allowed in here anymore. We will call the police." We were standing by the car, waiting for him, and we yelled at him for being a piece of shit. We got in the car and he started pulling chicken wings and Chinese donuts out of his pockets and eating them. We dropped him off at home and never spoke to him again. Story 14. I am neither an employee nor a customer, but a Chinese buffet I knew was shut down for a health code violation. An employee was cutting vegetables while using the toilet. To this day, I still wonder whether the employee brought a bucket into the kitchen or took vegetables into the toilet. I do not know which is worse. Story 15. I was not an employee, but I went to hometown buffet. The child in front of me was slightly shorter than the buffet bar and had his hands in the yellow jello, just massaging it. His mother then came by and pulled him away without saying anything, while a man made himself a bowl of jello. 10-year-old me was too appalled to say anything. I have not eaten jello since then. Story 16. I was once at an old country buffet, waiting patiently to get some mac and cheese. The kid in front of me piled his plate high, then started tapping the serving spoon to get all of the cheesy goodness free from the spoon. Once he was satisfied with his handiwork, he licked the spoon clean. I did not get any mac and cheese and have not been back since. Story 17. I did not work at an all-you-can-eat restaurant, but my sister did. The buffet was on the first floor, so diners had to take either the stairs or the elevator to their seats. One day a woman was carrying a tray with many items down the stairs. Glasses, plates, and other dishes. My sister asked if she needed any assistance. The woman replied, "You assume because I am fat I need help?" My sister did not react. A few seconds later the woman fell down the stairs. There was blood and food everywhere. Story 18. I had a coworker who briefly managed Orion's buffet. He said it was common for people to gorge themselves, then purge in the restroom and start eating again so they could get their money's worth. Story 19. I work in an all-you-can-eat restaurant that uses tablets for ordering. According to my boss, it is inspired by a Japanese concept. We serve Asian food, Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. The premise is that customers order their food in rounds and we bring it to their table when it is ready. We always warn customers beforehand that if they leave food behind because they ordered too much, they must pay extra depending on what they left. We have seen people try the strangest tricks to avoid paying extra. Dumping food into handbags, shoving it into their mouths and later flushing it in the bathroom, or putting hair on it and then blaming us. When we catch them, they often refuse to pay and blame us. Sometimes people even involve the police. There have been multiple occasions when the police were called to resolve disputes over only €5. I guess some people's greed has no limit. Story 20. A college friend worked at a Chinese buffet. The staff caught a regular customer dipping his pizza in the wonton soup bowl while in line, not at his table. He would take a bite, dip it, and eat it. After he did it for the 4th time in a month, the management kicked him out. Story 21. Not a worker, but I once saw a grown man have a childlike meltdown because he showed up to Soup Plantation too late and missed the biscuits and gravy. Story 22. Not a worker, but I was at a Chinese buffet with an optional hot pot that cost extra. There was a separate section with raw ingredients for the hot pot. A man loaded his plate with those raw items and began eating them, including raw shrimp. He appeared to have an intellectual disability. Restaurant staff came over to tell him he was eating the wrong things and tried to explain. He became very embarrassed and said he did not understand how it worked. With the staff speaking limited English and the man unable to fully grasp what had happened, it was an awkward moment I will not forget. Story 23. I managed a buffet in a Reno casino for a few months. A family came in, mother, father, and 2 young children. I was called over because the mother had vomited on her plate and the table and wanted us to remove it and clean it up. I asked if she was okay. She said she always vomits when she eats cheese. She had gotten an enchilada, it was Mexican theme night, and enchiladas almost always have cheese. I told her I had to call janitorial because none of my staff was trained to handle biohazards. She didn't understand why I couldn't just take it. Janitorial came but couldn't clean because she refused to move from the table, so they left. She called me back and started yelling. The father joined in. Apparently she wanted to keep eating after vomiting, which I thought was really gross. I had them sit at another table so they could all keep eating. Janitorial returned and cleaned the other table. When they left, they made a scene in front of the whole restaurant and demanded their money back. I refused. The father got in my face and shouted that I was a racist white bitch and said his wife made far more money than I did. I called security. They stormed out, pulling pictures off the wall and shattering them on the floor. The father also picked up a vase and broke it. The children ran around and banged on the walls. Security finally showed up after they had left. I filed a report and they were placed on the 86 list. I fucking hate people. Story 24. I was not an employee, but I was standing behind a woman at Hometown Buffet. She was getting lasagna, a very cheesy pasta that left long strands of cheese when lifted. I watched her lift the pasta, twirl the excess cheese wrapped around her index finger, clip it off with her thumbnail, and fling it back into the serving pan. I knew I should not have been at Hometown Buffet in the first place, and this confirmed I would never go back. Story 25. I worked as a server at a Chinese buffet, and 4 things came to mind instantly. 1. A middle-aged woman vomited on her table and blamed it on giving herself the wrong insulin dose. The 4 mountains of food she had eaten probably contributed as well. She profusely apologized and tipped me $1. 2. I tried to pick up a dirty plate from a table that had a big pool of hibachi sauce and grease on it. The customer stopped me and said, "That's the best part," then proceeded to drink the sauce like it was the milk after a bowl of cereal. 3. A young mother complained because the crab meat and cheese we serve on the buffet had made her infant sick and the child vomited. The child was not even a year old. I'm not a childcare expert, but baked artificial crab meat and mozzarella cheese can't be good for a baby. 4. One morning, shortly before opening, the restaurant was raided by United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The entire back of the house and one of our managers were deported. The back of house staff was half Chinese and half Latin American. Story 26. I witnessed a woman arrive with about 5 children and make them sit at a table while she got food, even though they seemed old enough to serve themselves. She grabbed 2 trays, placed 3 plates on each, and piled most of the chicken nuggets onto a single plate, creating a large mound. She did the same with 5 other dishes, leaving 5 pans that had been full or nearly full empty. People were understandably angry, especially because she repeated this behavior with other dishes and often glared at anyone who tried to take food she appeared to want. Story 27. The family had left, and I saw their dirty plates with napkins crumpled on top. I cleared and bussed the plates. Shortly after, they came back and the mother began yelling at me in Spanish, so I asked my coworker to translate. Her daughter's retainers had been wrapped in the napkins, and I had already thrown them away. She complained that the retainers cost more than $250, so I had to dig through a large trash can filled with food and drink sludge for about 15 minutes. Fortunately, I found them. The daughter thanked me and seemed embarrassed that her mother had made me search the trash. Story 28. At one point, I worked at a pizza place that had a daytime buffet where I made pizzas. One time, 2 very large men came in right when we opened for the buffet. The manager on duty placed the first 2 pizzas on the buffet, turned to grab the next 2, turned back, and both pizzas were gone. A few minutes later, the 2 men walked up, each took an entire pizza, and returned to continue eating. They repeated this for the entire 3 hours we offered the buffet, each time taking a whole pizza for himself. It was one hell of a day. They were morbidly obese. This was at Pizza Hut in 2011 with regular dough medium pizzas measuring 12 inches, roughly 30 centimeters, in diameter. Story 29. There was a fairly expensive restaurant in Dallas in the 1980s called Southern Kitchen. It cost about $25 per person back then, with food served to the table. The food was really good. They were famous for cinnamon rolls. The owner said he had seen many women ruin expensive purses hiding those rolls. Man, I miss that place. Story 30. Pickle Boy. There was a man who used to come into our restaurant who clearly was not all there in the head. He was functional but odd. Over the months, he became much stranger. He started wearing women's underwear over his clothes, even stuffing his bra. Picture a 6 feet 2 inches, 250 pounds man with a baby face wearing silky underpants and a lace bra over ratty jeans and a stained Hawaiian shirt. He went from holding a sort of normal conversation to spouting conspiracy theory word salad. The strangest change was his eating. He used to eat a variety of our soup, salad, and baked potato options from the buffet, but as his mental health deteriorated, so did his desire for variety. By the time his behavior became aggressive and we had to remove him permanently, he came in for two things: pickles and ranch dressing. He would pile as many pickle slices as he could onto his plate, then put so much ranch on them that the dressing and pickle juice ran all over the tray. He ate it all, his face covered in ranch and pickle bits. Then he drank water straight from the pitcher he stole from the wait station, sliming it with pickle and ranch residue. There was never a dull moment with him around. Edited to add, for those asking about the term 86, in this case it means we kicked him out permanently. Story 31. I used to work in an all-you-can-eat buffet. I usually cleaned up after people once closing time passed. Essentially, I was the de facto janitor. One time I cleaned the bathrooms after we closed. No problems in the female bathroom, but in the male restroom the image burned into my retina. An old man was lying face down in a puddle of opaque black muck, the color of motor oil. It smelled awful, like fecal matter and rotten durian. The liquid was smeared across the floor and up the walls, with handprints where he had tried to pull himself up. Peering into the toilet, I saw more of that brown liquid with chunks of corn. I could also see chyme, the pulpy acidic fluid before food becomes stool, with scraps of chicken breast and sauce. The man had not merely fainted. He was dead, a fresh corpse in the early stages of algor mortis. His pants were off. He had soiled himself. He had emptied himself like a cement mixer, but with a dark, foul liquid. Needless to say, I vomited. After that, I quit. Fuck that place. Story 32. I am not a worker, but the Golden Corral in the city where I went to college was shut down because of an employee. He thought it was odd that they made a busboy sign a non-disclosure agreement to work there. He discovered they were breaking almost every health and safety rule, serving meat that had turned green, leaving food out overnight, and continuing to serve food after a freezer had broken down for 3 days with temperatures in the danger zone. He recorded the footage with a hidden camera and gave it to the news. I was so glad I never ate there. Story 33. I am not an employee, but I witnessed a marvelous thing. I was sitting in a small-town Chinese buffet when 3 large men, not obese but built like farmhands, came in. They proceeded to clean house plate after plate. They were not wasteful. They ate everything they took and were very polite to the staff and other customers. I would bet each man ate a dozen plates stacked high. The cooks were working to keep up. My family and I watched this feat unfold in amazement. When they approached the counter to pay, all the eating had taken only about 45 minutes. The manager greeted them and, in broken English, said, "You men, you no pay, but you no come back." The men exchanged a "yeah, fair enough" look with the manager and left. Edit. Thanks for the gold, internet stranger. Glad so many liked this story. Story 34. I was not a worker. I was in China on vacation at a new buffet. I made the mistake of going the first week because my relatives were dying to go. There was a lobster station that served fresh steamed lobster. Whenever a new tray came out, people would swarm it. Before they made a rule limiting how many you could have, people grabbed as many as they could. One table had about 2 dozen lobsters for 6 people. A man at the table kept bringing back additional lobsters, and eventually people became angry because the lobsters were just sitting there uneaten. A few people confronted the group and started taking the lobsters. Within 3 minutes, a full-on fight broke out. People were swinging, and lobsters flew everywhere. Story 35. My college microbiology professor was also a director at the state health department responsible for inspecting restaurants. On the first day, she told us never to eat at an all-you-can-eat buffet. Story 36. I worked at a pizza buffet for 2 years during college. I have a number of stories, but the one I will always remember is the man who got very upset that we would not make more dessert pizza when we were half an hour past closing. He came in with his presumed wife and 2 children around 8:30. We closed at 9. Nothing out of the ordinary happened until 9, when it was still common for people to be finishing up and eating what pizza was left. I was doing the dishes and taking empty plates back from the buffet when I saw him standing with his arms crossed, staring as I took the empty dessert pizza dish. He said something like, "When's the next one coming out?" Inavegotan. I told him we closed at 9 and we could not make anything past then because the oven gets shut off. The manager overheard and stepped in to back me up, and I quickly went to the back to continue the dishes. He seemed pissed, but that was not unheard of. Being a cheap pizza buffet, we did not exactly serve the most affluent customers. About 5 minutes later, as I finished the plates, the manager came barreling through the back door, out of breath. He grabbed 2 of the long wooden pizza pushers and said, "Come with me." I had no idea what was happening, but I grabbed a pusher and followed him out the door. I learned later that the customer had started flipping out, throwing the register and a fishbowl. He grabbed a broom and swung it around, hitting the girl behind the counter. As I exited from the back, the man was screaming and ranting unintelligibly. He seemed to be looking for a fight. He walked up to the manager, got right in his face and shoved him back. Then he came at me. I was very close to taking a swing at his knees, but the other manager had quickly gotten back up and the customer resumed harassing him. After about 2 minutes of tiptoeing around a brawl, and his wife presumably screaming for him to get back in the car, he eventually got in and they drove off. I will not forget the glossed-over look in his eyes as he came after me. Still freaks me out. Story 37. I worked at a Shoney's in high school. We had a breakfast buffet every day and a seafood buffet on Friday nights. You would see food dropped into the wrong containers, cheese sauce splattered everywhere, and people tasting items off the buffet bar instead of at their seats. Leftover Friday fish fillets were turned into fish chowder the next morning, and that chowder was served all weekend. My understanding is you are not allowed to save cream-based soups and foods from one day to the next, but we served them anyway. We often had slippery shrimp that we breaded and served. I handled so much shrimp daily that I smelled like fish almost all the time, even after showering. Story 38. I was a customer, not a worker. My wife and I went to Sweet Tomatoes for a lunch date. Unlimited salad and soup were always good. One time I saw a man by the soups take the serving ladle for one of the weekly specials, take a big slurp from it, then apparently not like it and spit it back into the ladle before putting it back in the soup. What the heck, dude? I got up immediately and told the nearest staff what I had seen. They promptly removed that nearly full pot of soup. I did not have any more soup that visit. The what-ifs were too strong, which is a shame because I love their chunky chicken noodle. Story 39. I used to cook for a breakfast buffet in 2012 and 2013 as one of my first jobs. The restaurant in question, which I will not name, rhymed with meat and bark. Most of our customers were older, and many were entitled and came straight from church. A few highlights. 1. One elderly woman kept implying I was not old enough to work there. I told her my real age, 17, but she insisted they were making me say that and that it was illegal. She was convinced I must be underage or working for free, and I did not know how to respond. 2. A man took all the bacon and put it on his plate, then pointed to the empty pan and demanded I look at it. When I asked what I was supposed to be looking for, he demanded to know what was wrong. He said there was no bacon left and asked why I would not refill it. I told him we had just refilled it a few minutes earlier and someone must have taken it all. He did not connect the dots. 3. A woman looked at the bacon in disgust and said it was 2013 and asked who even eats meat anymore. 4. A woman showed up 15 minutes after the buffet closed while we were taking it down and demanded her food. We politely explained the buffet had closed 15 minutes earlier and that servers give a last call. She said she would complain to the manager. I told her to do so. The manager already knew. 5. The same woman came at least twice a week and complained about terrible service and bad food every time. Finally, a hostess asked why she kept coming if the food and service were so bad, which shut her up. I laughed out loud. Story 40. I am not an employee. That said, I was at a Kentucky Fried Chicken in Bartonville, Illinois. They had a small buffet with the essentials: fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, biscuits, coleslaw, and a few other items that I doubt anyone touched. I had already sat down to eat and watched an older woman, about 60, walk to the buffet. If you know anything about this area, You know the quality of people we are dealing with. The woman walked up and grabbed a piece of chicken from the back of the buffet. She was not wearing a bra, and her right breast became exposed through the bottom of her shirt. Her shirt was not what I would call age-appropriate. I could not stop staring. She did not adjust it. I was not sure she knew what had happened. Her right breast brushed the mashed potatoes, leaving an indentation in the food. I had to leave. Story 41. Obligatory disclaimer. I am not a buffet worker. I was just a witness. We were waiting in line for the soft-serve machine at Golden Corral. The woman in front of us reached the machine and awkwardly jerked the handle around, trying to get at the sweet ice cream inside. She was pushing, pulling, and twisting, doing everything except turning it to the right, which would have dispensed the ice cream. She appeared perplexed. Then she wrapped her lips around the spout, formed a seal with her mouth, and tried to suck the ice cream out of the tap. One of the workers saw this, looked disgusted, and unplugged the machine. On the way out, we saw that he had placed an out-of-order sign on it, so they did not continue serving it after the incident. Story 42. When I was 16, I was a busboy at a restaurant. A morbidly obese family of four, two parents and two teenagers, all very large, came in after the lunch rush when it was slow and were taking full advantage of the all-you-can-eat buffet. On my way to bussing tables, I walked past the restrooms and saw the teenage son walk out of the men's room with a huge shit-eating grin on his round, prepubescent face. I immediately thought this could not be good and went to check the restroom, since one of our responsibilities was to keep the restrooms generally clean. The teenage boy had explosive diarrhea and had not even managed to hit the toilet. There was shit all over the toilet tank, the walls, and the floor. It looked as if a hand grenade of feces had gone off in the stall. It was, bar none, the most disgusting thing I have ever seen in a bathroom. I thought about cleaning it up, but instead I went to tell my manager. He was a pretty hard-driving guy, but he took one look at it, locked the stall, and told me, "You do not get paid enough to clean this up. We will get the janitor to take care of this tonight." Story 43. Not a horror story, just funny. I worked at Wendy's when they had salad bars. Customers could choose a single-serving bowl or an all-you-can-eat platter. They used to serve eat-in chili in styrofoam bowls. The large size doubled as a chili bowl. The taco salad used the bottom plate. On a slow afternoon, a man came in and chose a single-serving bowl. After a few minutes, our manager motioned to the sandwich maker and me to discreetly watch the salad he was assembling. The man filled the bowl with salad, then made a ring of overlapping cucumber slices to extend the lip of the bowl upward. He filled that with salad, then added another ring. It took several minutes to build the structure, but when he finished he had a tower of salad well over a foot tall, with multiple rings of cucumber slices containing it. That salad was an engineering marvel. He carefully carried it back to his table, sat down, and looked up guiltily as our manager walked out to him. The manager handed him a free item coupon and told him it was the most impressive salad he had ever seen and that the next one was on the house. Story 44. I served at Golden Corral for 6 months, and it was a terrible place. You might think it would be easy because you do not take orders, but it was not. Cleaning up messes, bussing tables, getting drinks and clean plates, singing for birthdays and side work kept you busy. Most customers were not the greatest. They made appalling messes, let their children run wild, and did not tip even though we were paid $2.13 per hour and relied on tips. I saw so many unaccompanied children reaching into the buffet serving dishes. I saw one child dip a marshmallow into the chocolate fountain, lick the chocolate off, and put the same marshmallow back repeatedly. Rudeness was the norm. For example, people got into a physical fight over a table on Easter Sunday. The managers were abusive. They mistreated everyone, seemed to dislike women, and took advantage of the fact that many staff members were foreign-born. When we received a negative mystery shop report, we were all gathered into a meeting to be screamed at. When the next report was excellent, nothing was said. The report was just posted on the bulletin board. One manager told me to be sure to report all my tips to the Internal Revenue Service because he was sure I would be a waitress all my life and wanted to make sure I would receive something from Social Security when I was older. The managers kept tea bags in their pockets, So if a customer wanted tea, you had to find a manager and they would begrudgingly hand one over. Servers were also expected to catch and confront people stealing from the buffet, such as putting leftovers in a bag. We were not allowed to eat. Most low-cost restaurants give a meal per shift, but not Golden Corral. To eat, you had to clock out, get in line, pay half price, get your plate, and sit down. After about 5 minutes, a manager would almost always say the break was over, so you had to go back to work and throw your food away. I am hypoglycemic, so I ate before work and carried a granola bar in my pocket. I could eat the bar in the women's restroom because the managers were both men. Once, while I was trying to eat quickly in the next stall, a very large woman had a very smelly bowel movement. It was one of the worst moments in my life. I quit shortly thereafter, got a much better job with a good retirement plan, and called Golden Corral corporate office to report everything. Story 45. Norwegian Cruise Line, one of the world's largest cruise lines, suspended visits to China, citing reports that excessive buffet consumption and food waste by some passengers made operations unprofitable. Story 46. I've always wanted to make a documentary and tour the country, visiting every Golden Corral and Ryan's. There, I would interview the staff to learn the worst thing they have found in a chocolate fountain. What could it be? A shoe? A finger? Maybe a diaper? Story 47. A family friend was once at a Golden Corral and took his young son to the men's room. While there, he heard two people having sex in a stall. He took his son back to the table and then returned to the bathroom to confront them for being inappropriate in a family restaurant. Two men walked out, the restaurant manager and one of his employees. He filed a complaint with corporate, but I do not know the outcome. Story 48. My uncle is a chef and is currently rotating among different carveries, which we British call buffets, trying to show them how to properly run the business and make edible food so customers will return and the place will not shut down. He has told me about a few places that he did not even want to enter because of the state of the kitchen, and he wonders how they have not killed someone yet. Most recently, chefs were cutting off rotten pieces of food and then serving it. He has had to fire multiple people on the spot for behavior like that. Story 49. We were at a buffet restaurant in the United Kingdom, and my significant other, who is quite thin and small, was looking at the dessert section when an impatient larger man came, grabbed him by the shoulders, and physically moved him out of the way. It was rude. He was put off the rest of the meal, and we ended up leaving. Story 50. I learned a long time ago that the phrase all you can eat is a very negative term when it comes to advertising food. Story 51. As someone who is constantly in and out of kitchens for work, I can assure you that all you can eat buffets are the absolute worst. If it looks questionable from the outside, you are probably right. Story 52. All of these reignited my hatred for Golden Corral and Old Country Buffet. Story 53. A local Chinese buffet was shut down after multiple reports and photographic evidence of cockroaches in the food and throughout the restaurant. We do not typically have cockroaches in Alaska. Story 54. Not a buffet worker, but I was on holiday in the Caribbean and the hotel had an all-you-can-eat buffet. I had finished dinner and went to the dessert station where there was a self-serve ice cream machine. I was in a queue behind two people. The person at the front appeared to be a Floridian woman in her mid-30s. I was British, as was the person directly in front of me. She took a bowl, used the little ice cream scoop, and licked it. Then she scrunched up her face, moved to the chocolate flavor, and did the same thing again. At that point, I decided to pass. The person behind had already left, and the person in front of me muttered, "You pig." She then turned to us with a confused expression and said, "What? There's water to wash it in anyway?" That is how I lost faith in humanity. I had already lost faith in Floridians long before. I could tell she was Floridian from her accent. Story 55. My friend from college is an epidemiologist who has worked for various Midwestern state health departments. She warned me never to eat at an all-you-can-eat buffet. The worst offenders for serving old or bad food were Golden Corral, Sizzler, and Shakey's Pizza. Story 56. My first job in high school was at Cece's Pizza. We dealt with gross things. People sticking gum to tables, walking in wearing swimsuits, dripping wet and barefoot. We eventually told them to stop, and other unsanitary practices. There's a reason I'll never eat grape tomatoes at a restaurant again. The worst was a family that came in at least once a week. They were all very obese except for the husband, who was scrawny and looked perpetually exhausted. The woman was missing many teeth, wore 1970s-style glasses, and they all smelled slightly of urine. She would ride in on her scooter, pay with vouchers, and make request after request. They never ate from the buffet, so every pizza they ordered was sent directly to their table, and everyone was wrong. I had no idea whether the son was developmentally delayed or just socially awkward, but he and his mother seemed to work as a team. They would eat most of one pizza, then realize something was wrong and ask for another. Then they would change their minds. We want zesty pepperoni with mushrooms. After eating 3/4 of the pizza, they'd complain the mushrooms were canned and demand fresh ones. So we'd make another, which would be wrong too. The woman would berate whoever brought the pizza or anyone she could wave over, since none of the staff got up. They even did this to get drinks refilled. Meanwhile, the son grew increasingly upset because his pizzas, which he still ate most of, were wrong. He became loud, got up, and paced. We offered to remake the pizza after 2 or 3 attempts. The woman yelled about how we kept messing it up, asked why she would want to come back, and blamed the cook in the back, saying that if he knew English he might do it right. The manager rushed out, gave them vouchers for a free meal, and they said, "Okay, maybe we'll be back, but I just don't know." A week or 2 later, they returned. I was so relieved when I left for college and could kiss that job goodbye. Story 57. This was probably the largest couple I ever served. The man weighed 600 pounds. The woman weighed over 450 pounds and could only walk by using the wheelchair she was pushing him in. He held the plates while she scooped food and then pushed him back to the table. Back at the table, she began having difficulty breathing while eating. Both of them were spilling food on themselves. The people at the next table asked to be moved because they were disgusted watching them commit a slow suicide. Story 58. I didn't work there, but this is my horror story. I was 13 or 14 and visiting family in Modesto, California. One day my uncle and I were leaving the mall and he asked if I was hungry. I said yes, and he asked if I wanted to go to a Golden Corral-style buffet inside the mall. I said okay because I was a teenager and always hungry. We walked around the stations, filled our plates, and sat down. After about 5 minutes, we heard a loud commotion. We looked around the dining area, confused, and then we saw it. Across the dining room, a morbidly obese man sat alone at a long table. The alarming sound was a loud, guttural retching, followed by the most violent spray of vomit I had ever witnessed. There were 6 or 7 heaves. He was not slumped over. Only his head was jerking back and forth as the vomit sprayed out. He tried to cover his mouth with his hand, but it had the same effect as putting your thumb over the end of a hose. The spray covered his table and plates and spilled over the edges onto the floor. Near the end of the heaves, there was less pressure, and the vomit oozed onto his chin, chest, belly, and thighs. He did not move. He sat in it. Employees who looked only slightly older than me ran over and assessed the damage. They asked if he was okay, apologized, removed his vomit-covered plates, and wiped the table with wet rags. One brought a bucket and mop. He used some rags to clean himself. The people near him had already left in obvious disgust. My uncle and I could not look away. The employees left. He did not move. He sat there. I returned to eating because I was hungry. A few minutes later, my uncle signaled me to look back at the man's table. We watched him stand, grab his walker, walk to a serving station, serve himself more food, return to his table, sit down, and continue eating. It was incredible. I grabbed a soft serve cone on the way out. Story 59. The family was at a fairly high-end brunch. My husband was waiting for the chafing dish to be filled with eggs Benedict. When it came, the person in front of him put 2 on her plate and ate a third while standing over the dish, dripping into it. What the fuck? You can't wait. You're an adult. Story 60. I'll keep this short. I'm not an employee, but I went to Old Country Buffet often when I was younger, at least twice a month. I saw a man pour the juices from the steak section into his cup, set the container down, and then sipped from the cup while walking back to his table. Story 61. My friend and I walked into a buffet that served pizza, fried chicken, and other southern staples. A large woman sat at a round table by herself. The table was covered with 5 or 6 empty plates. After we finished eating, we walked past her as she returned to the buffet. She yelled across the room to the manager by the door, "Where's the fucking chicken?" We were all in shock that she would say that with families around, but my friend yelled back, "You ate it all." People burst out laughing as we left. Story 62. I worked the all-you-can-eat crab night at a restaurant where a 600-pound Elvis impersonator came with an entourage who cracked the crab legs for him so he could grab fistfuls of crab meat, dip his hands in bowls of butter, and stuff his face as fast as possible from the moment we opened until we ran out or closed. He was polite and tipped me well, but it was horrifying to watch. Story 63. A girl loaded a plate, smashed it, went to the bathroom, and vomited, repeating this about 10 times. Story 64. Not a buffet worker, but has anyone heard of the Rajneeshi incident? A religious cult organized attacks to contaminate a local buffet with salmonella so residents became ill on election day, hoping to secure their leader's election. Story 65. Jesus. Reading these makes me wonder if there are actually decent buffets out there. I think the one near me is all right, but now I'm nervous. Story 66. We have a huge buffet with a separate dessert buffet that is presented with fireworks, dry ice, and staff walking around the restaurant with bells every weekend night. One time we had a hotel guest who resembled Jabba the Hutt in size. She had a walker and used it to sit on when she was tired of walking. I usually assume people have medical conditions that affect their weight, but this case was different. She started with 4 eggs, ate 2 plates of fries, 3 steaks, 6 pancakes, and 7 sodas. I could not keep track of it all, but it was at least 8 plates of food. She waited for the dessert to be set up. It usually starts at 7, and we use do not cross tape as a fun prop for the children. She was sitting on her walker at 6:45. Once the fireworks and dry ice were removed, she went all in. She took whole cakes to her table, dipped many items in the chocolate fountain, and pushed children aside to get to the sweets first. She grabbed items with her bare hands, despite available tongs, and put her hands in the fountain. I felt physically sick watching. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.